talk about our next hard truth, which is the seasons of our life where we really feel the individuality part of this walk. Again, we know this is a communal experience, but even you and I being a part of the same community, we have some individual things that we have to live through, walk through, right? And I get to come to you with it and I get to share with you about it, but it's still only something I have to go through. It's still only something that you have to go through. And I think this kind of leads to another hard truth, which is this idea of consecration and isolation. So let's talk a little bit about that truth from your perspective.
Yeah, I think a lot of people know what isolation is. I don't think a lot of people know what consecration is. So isolation is just when you separate it. It's separation that is forced, reactive, or driven by pain, fear, shame, or trauma. The source of isolation usually comes from wounds, burnout, rejection, or spiritual attack. Um, and the nature of it is just a unhealthy disconnection when you pull away from people, purpose, and often from God. The fruit of it is loneliness, confusion, vulnerability. An example is when Elijah was in First Kings 19, and he was like hiding, and he was like, "Hey, God, I'm scared. Jezebel's out there," and that's what happens when you isolate it. And all of us know isolation, but as we know through COVID and stuff, we got kind of used to being isolated. But consecration is completely different. Consecration, the definition of that is being set apart for God. It's intentional separation unto holiness and purpose. The source of it is initiated by the Holy Spirit or a conscious decision to follow God more deeply. The nature of it is like life-giving because you're drawing closer to God, not just away from people. The fruit of consecration is clarity, growth, intimacy with God, and preparation for greater service. And the best example of that, we already know when Jesus said, "Hey, I'm gone for 40 days." He got baptized, then dipped out about 40 days, consecrated. He wasn't isolated. He wasn't by himself. I think that's a major difference to me is the difference between isolation and consecration. Is isolation, you're doing it by yourself. Consecration, you're doing it with God. And just elevation, in layman's terms, elevation requires separation.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a hard truth that we don't want to talk about because there's a tension with it, a real tension with it that we don't like talking about. So that's a hard truth that consecration can feel like you isolated.
Thank you for sharing the definitions around these because I wrote down something you said, which was consecration is about getting closer to God, not just away from people. And I can think about my own seasons of consecration. And I think the times where it felt the most isolating was when I lost sight of that. When I lost sight of the fact that it was about getting closer to God. There is there's seasons where in our life we are running towards God. And then there's seasons in our life where we end up in a space that we didn't necessarily choose. And I find that in those moments, that's where we have to realize that this is about getting closer to God, not getting away from people. And I know, like, when I have been in situations where I have felt l- led to leave jobs or to leave companies, and you can wrestle with that in your mind, maybe because there is some element of whatever situation you're in is not working, right? And that could be the job, the relationship, etc. But what I realized in life is that God graces us all the time to be in seasons where things aren't the way we want them to be. There's plenty of jobs you've been in where, for a certain amount of time, you could deal with it. You could deal with the manager that was stressing you out. You could deal with the person you didn't like that got on your nerves. You could deal with maybe it's not making as much as I want to, whatever it might be, right? You were graced for a season to be able to handle something. And then there's a moment when that grace leaves. And we can think about that grace like the cloud in the Old Testament, where that led the Israelites through the wilderness. As long as they followed the cloud by day and the fire by night, that was symbolic of God's presence. And so when we think about grace being God's presence, then in situations where we feel like we no longer can stay in them, we no longer can handle being there, and we can't tolerate it, we should think about that God's grace has moved, his presence has moved. And so in those situations, we should be focused on, well, let me follow the grace, let me follow the presence, let me go get closer to God. So in that situation, with that mindset, it's not about leaving people. It's not about leaving the job. It's not getting away from the people. It's about moving closer to God. That is a catalyst for consecration when the grace has moved. And so when you framed it that way in that definition, it just made me want to sit in that more in my life, that every move that I've made in my life, even when people didn't understand it, even when I didn't always understand it, I know without a shadow of a doubt that there was some part in me that, if I could just say it as plainly as I could say it, no matter how many different ways I tried to dress it up and make it seem I was moving on, whatever I said, the real answer is, it's like I was just trying to get closer to God. I was trying to get closer to what God had for me, to the relationship he had for me, to the work he had for me, to the life he had for me, to the community he had for me, to the teaching he had for me. That is what consecration really is. It's like following the cloud, no matter where it leads, no matter what it looks like, for God's purpose, to be closer to him. So I love that definition. I don't think I will ever hear that the same as the way you described it, which is this idea of getting closer to God versus away from people.
Phew.
That was good.